Good afternoon, everybody. This is Nevin, your host of the Politically Homeless podcast. And with me is Mr. John Columbus. John is running in the Republican primary here in our state of Florida, in the Republican U.S. Senate primary against Rick Scott. And I believe there are one or two other contenders too as well. John is, an interesting background. He'll talk a little bit about his professional background, his education, and then we're going to go through kind of rapid fire questions and whatnot on the different issues and where we could also find information about John's platform too as well. You don't mind me calling you John, right? Or would you rather call me?
That's my name.
And politics is your game. And so, John, just tell me briefly about yourself, your professional background, your occupation, where you're from, and also we're going to then take a deep dive into the issues. We're going to go through different things too as well, okay?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm from Orlando, Florida. My dad was an executive at Disney for 38 years. He's retired now. And my mom had a small business that is now closed, and both of them are retired. I live with my mom and dad. I'm your average millennial trying to make his way, right? I went to Dr. Phillips High School here in Orlando. It's right across the street from Universal Studios. I was senior class president, class of 2002. So that's where I kind of got the itch for politics. But as I ventured into the real world, I took a step back from politics. I didn't really think I would be getting into this until about like 2 or 3 years ago. But out of high school, I went to New York University, where I studied theater. Right out of college, where I graduated with a BFA in theater, Bachelor of Fine Arts. I worked at Paper Mill Playhouse. I did the first national tour of Monty Python's Spamalot. I was touring the country for 2.5 years. I went to 80 different cities throughout North America. And I then went to Hollywood, where I spent 3 years, and my brother opened a small business that I helped him from the ground up with a brick and mortar studio, which is still thriving. Then I moved back here to Orlando, where I started working at Walt Disney World and Universal and SeaWorld, just your average entertainer. And then I started working at Disney Cruise Line for about 5 years before COVID hit. And suddenly my entire industry shut down for a few years, and that's when my political brain started ticking, right? When I was denied doing what I had trained for, and I was denied my my creative outlet, and I started really getting more engaged in politics. And this is where I started to understand why the Greeks had their theater and their politics held in the same location, because politics and theater are actually really close and tied together. People would ask hypothetical questions in the theater and try to answer those questions in their politics. And nowadays, and what's really gotten me into the political arena, is that I don't believe we have the best storytellers out there, and we don't have good faith actors who are working for the best of the people. I believe that we have selfish and dangerous politicians who are looking for their own self-interest instead of the interest of the people. And this is where I, as an empathetic, collaborative artist, I want to step up and say that we can do better, and we should do better, because our future depends on it.
Absolutely. It's a very good introduction. I definitely appreciate that. You're in the arts and theater, and my daughter, Emily, she goes to Savannah College of Art and Design, and we talked before the show started over her major, which is in set and theater design and digital arts and whatnot. So fellow parent of an aspiring arts person who, like you, she wants to work in the private sector too as well, more than likely is looking to get into internships at Disney too as well. And one of the strengths that I hear you saying is you have quite a bit of private sector experience. You have multiple family members that were business people and entrepreneurs. And I think that will resonate with the voters, Republican voters, and even voters on the other side, like the independents and the Democrats too. Because I think many Americans do support, and many Floridians support capitalism in one form or another. We're going to talk about that because you seem to have some views that are aligned with me. Now, in a nutshell, why did you choose the Republican Party over running as a Democrat or an independent?
I feel I've been a Republican most of my life. There was a couple of years where I did switch to the Democratic Party for about 2 years, and I feel that I personally identify more as a conservative. I'm your straight white American Christian who wants to. I am very conservative with a lot of my views, uh, and I feel that my voice wouldn't be heard in the Democratic arena. And nothing, no offense to them, but I feel like there are a lot there's a bigger pool of people to in that arena, and I want to have a conversation with fellow conservatives, and I've been coining myself as a progressive conservative because it might be an oxymoron, but I feel that it's okay to think about innovating and looking toward the future, but also figuring out how do we fiscally be responsible and how do we make sure that we can ensure a safe and cleaner tomorrow for the next generations. That's why I'm here to talk to my fellow Republicans about having another platform to stand behind instead of people who echo the same views. We have a spectrum of views, and I don't think that a centrist moderate point of view is being celebrated. Instead, people are trying to have these endless culture wars and saying that I'm right and you're wrong. And I'm here to say that maybe we are all right and we can all be wrong. We are humans who make mistakes, and nobody's perfect. And the only way that we're going to get better is through mutual concessions and uh, legislating through empathy instead of trying to demean and vilify the other side. And that's why I want to be more of a bipartisan person who is able to actually get work done, needed work done, instead of putting politics above uh, what needs to happen in this country.
Of course, yeah, no, and very good. You want to essentially be a non super ideological. You don't want to be ideologically rigid. And yes, you're right. In both camps, you have situations where, and I've seen it in the Democratic camp, there were certain interest issues that I had in alignment with a gentleman who's a Nova Southeastern University law professor, Tim Canova, and he launched two primaries against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and there was a lot of authoritarian, arguably, allegedly authoritarian measures that were taken in the Broward County Democratic Party, at least according to his account, and the account of his supporters, to really quash his campaign. And I'm not going to talk about inside baseball Republican politics. It's not the purpose of the show to talk about that, but I would like to talk about the voter response in respect to you. And there were some good points you made. Now, of course, bipartisanship, of course, can go either way. You can have bipartisan legislation that helps the American people and helps our national security. But also, I've found that there's bipartisan legislation in economics and national security, like passage of certain trade agreements like NAFTA or the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or permanent normal trade relations with China, or the repeal of Glass-Steagall, or permanent normal trade relations with the Russians back in 2012, which had bipartisan opposition because Democrats and Republicans knew that it would hurt the American people and national security, but also bipartisan support in both parties because there's a lot of big money interests. So I get the impression that you would be more on the side of really what helps average Americans more than just basically enriching the elites as your only reason for bipartisanship. But when you talk about conservatism, that's a word that's bandied around a lot. It's like the word socialism and capitalism. It means 1,000 different things for 1,000 different people. When you say, what does conservatism mean to you?
Um, it, conservative, you gotta be conservative with your spending. You can be conservative with your thoughts and conservative with your views and your speech. Uh, I believe it is keeping your cards close to your chest and privacy, and these are things that we need to celebrate and protect. Um, I believe that the Constitution is very conservative because it conserves the power of the government to select uh, some words that are bound into a document that we can only change through a 60% majority, right? So how do we make sure that our government isn't overreaching? Because that is why we formed this government, is because we had a monarch who was just bipolar and trying to legislate from across the sea, and we wanted something different. And we wanted to have a republic where we were able to have the people decide, and the people needed to make a difference. And conserving it to limited powers and balance of powers, and being able to have the freedom of the people as a priority instead of the power of government as the priority. So I'm here to celebrate our freedoms and also our liberties. And so, yes, I have some liberal views here and there as a theater professional. Like, I'm an ally to the LGBTQ plus community, but I also believe that we have moral responsibilities to take care of our future and future generations. And it's balancing that power, and we need to make sure that we listen to each other. Otherwise, we're just going to get sucked into our own little world. Where we're not going to be able to hear anything anybody else says. And that's one thing about being conservative with your voice, is if you listen twice as much as you speak, you're going to be able to learn a lot more. I just look at the root word of conservatism, and you can't have conservation without the word conservative. And that's one of my top priorities, which is making sure that our world is taken care of. And that may sound liberal to people, but I also believe that people are very liberal with their response to the environment. We need to make sure that we innovate and we have cleaner and renewable energy solutions, because we have a finite amount of oil, and this world's not going to just keep making oil. Like, it will eventually run out. And I hope by the time we, oh, sorry, I have a cat. I hope by the time, like I'm leaving this earth, we will have figured out a way to live sustainably. And that should be a conservative point of view. And I believe that I believe that some people,
yeah, one of the things you mentioned, I'm sorry, one of the things you mentioned real quickly, because I wanted to catch you on the environmental and the fuel issue before we go to the next topic. To basically accentuate your balanced things, you also put on the platform that you're not saying that we're just going to cut off drilling and stop drilling for oil. It's like you want to take an all of above approach. So I wanted to clarify that for the viewers too, that this is an example of your non-ideological approach before we go into the next topic. So I do
Well,
apologize.
it states in the Constitution that we need to promote the progress of science and useful arts. That is part of the job of us as humans and as government. And so if we ignore these the clean renewable energy, then we're neglecting what we should be doing in Congress, right? So how do we celebrate and innovate instead of demonizing people who want a better future? And I believe that a lot of Republicans out there are happy with status quo and just don't want to see things changing. And that's one thing I learned growing up as conservative is like, oh, if you don't want change, just vote no on everything. And I understand that, but the problem is that we need to keep evolving and we need to keep changing to keep up with what we're doing. 7 billion people on this planet, we affect the environment. Whether you like it or not, it's true. And so how do we make sure that we are protecting what we have so that future generations still have it? I don't want to see like the world disappearing because we were neglecting our responsibilities. And like, what was it in Sweden? They have like they just built in their infrastructure a side of the road that charges electric cars as you drive. Like, why don't we try to invest in some of that kind of infrastructure? And then suddenly we're less dependent on oil and we're not complaining that cars only go 250 miles with an electric charge. Like there are ways that we can innovate and responsible ways that we should. And I'm that's how I feel like I'm a progressive conservative because I believe, like Teddy Roosevelt, he was about preserving our natural environment and making sure that it is protected. And if we don't protect it, then we will overpower it. And that's why I'm voting no to Amendment 2 on the Florida ballot. I don't believe that we all have a constitutional right to hunt and fish however much we want, because suddenly the animals will disappear in a matter of years, and we're just going to be like, well, at least we had the right. And it's like, well, suddenly our ecosystem will have detrimental impact. And I believe the circle of life is very important, and we need to respect our home with all of our beings, like our cats and our dogs and all of our wonderful animals out there.
Your good friend there.
Yeah. He's playing with my computer and scratching his face on it. But yeah, so I'm here to promote our environment and promote green energy. And I don't believe that should polarize me as liberal thinking, because I believe that people who are burning as much gas and polluting the environment are being very liberal. And call yourself a conservative, that is a liberal action. As an actor, I define what I do through my actions. The words you speak and the act and what you act can often be two different things. You can say that you're conservative and suddenly and spend all the money in the world, then you're not being conservative, right? Like if you're polluting, you're not being conservative. That these words matter. And suddenly what's happening in the world is people are ignoring how the definitions of words and just changing the definitions of words to mean whatever they want them to mean. And that's not how language works, right? We have an evolving language as a librarian, we have things are constantly developing, but you can't just suddenly say that it's opposite day because you disagree with how a word is defined. And I'm and that's another reason why I'm getting into politics, is because people, especially politicians, are suddenly saying one thing and doing another. Like, for instance, Rick Scott, he is all about the border. He wanted to close the border and wanted to make sure that we stop illegal immigration. But then suddenly, when the bipartisan bill goes out there, he votes no on it because politics was more important to him than the border. Same with IVF. He said that he wanted to protect IVF, and then when legislation goes out there, he votes no on it. So, like, if you say something, you should act on it. And when you don't, that reflects on your integrity. And so that's why I'm stepping up to say, hold me to account. If I say one thing and do another, call me out. But I'm here to be transparent and open and make sure that the people are represented instead of special interests. And I believe that right now, current representation in Congress is out for the special interests and not the people, at the detriment of our future.
You're absolutely right about that. There's definitely, and there are precious exceptions on both parties that are not wholly owned by the special interests. Um, and one of the things I appreciate you, and the reason why I mentioned the drilling part, that you wouldn't phase it out totally. You want an all of above approach, which I appreciate because you realize you're a pragmatist, and that's why I wanted to cut it in for the benefit of the voters who might misinterpret you saying as, oh, he's another greenie and whatnot. No, I'm bringing that up based on what my research in your platform is. Really, you're a pragmatist, and yeah, I totally agree with you, of course, about the constitutional right about the hunting. I'm not per se against hunting and whatnot, but I think
No, we should have it, but I also
there is such a thing as a balance of nature too, as well, that has to be preserved. Yeah. And
right.
I appreciate that.
And also, speaking of green, I'm here to vote yes on Amendment 3. For all of you out there, I believe that cannabis is healthier than alcohol and tobacco. So please vote yes on Amendment 3 because we need 60% of the vote to make cannabis recreational and safer. I've experienced the charlatans out there who have put out some dank weed that is not good and not good for people. And I want to make sure that there is healthy cannabis out there, and the taxes of this support schools and law enforcement. So let's make sure that cannabis is out. And right now, I'm at a point where, yes, you can get medical marijuana, but I can't afford going to the doctor and paying the state and paying. There's all of these things that, like, why should I have to have permission from all these people to do something that is completely harmless? Honestly, I'm yes, there are some laws out there, like truck drivers, I don't believe should be smoking marijuana before they drive. Like, there are some legit things that we need to be able to test and make sure people are being safe. But I also believe that the laws we have right now, they're better than where we were 10 years ago. And I give Rick Scott credit. He's the one who opened the door to marijuana. He had empathy for people and allowed Charlotte's Web for cancer patients. And suddenly it started to trickle out that marijuana, it's a healthy herb. And I've been a firm believer. When I lived in Los Angeles, I lived above a hash bar. And so, like, I've seen the extreme of where it can go. And I'm here to say that it's not as bad as people think. There's a stigma around it, and I don't want to. I want to demystify the whole thing for everybody. It's a safe herb, and we should be more worried about alcohol and tobacco, honestly.
Absolutely. No, I mean, very interesting points, I have to say. And with us is John Columbus, who's running in the Republican primary, U.S. Senate, against the major contender and current incumbent, Rick Scott. Since you come from the private sector, you work in the private sector in the theater. You work for Disney. Your father was a retired executive from Disney. Your mother has had a business, and your brother has his own business as well. So obviously, you have an appreciation of the private sector. What is your views on restarting and jumpstarting the economy, especially being ravaged by inflation and of course, the unfair trade practices, as we've argued on the show in previous episodes with previous guests and whatnot, as well as also the price gouging, which you also address in your platform and whatnot. How do you balance legitimate regulation and rules of the road with a thriving free enterprise sector? And also, what are your solutions for the price gouging, and supply chain crisis, which really brought upon inflation?
Well, I believe that we live amongst American oligarchs, speaking of Rick Scott, and people who are the super, super, super rich aren't letting the money trickle down the way that they said that they would. That was the Reaganomics, and I'm still waiting for that to happen. What we need more small businesses. That's how we're going to thrive, is through competition and the free market. And if you're not good with your business, that's your own fault. Like if I'm not good with this campaign, that's on me. Uh, and that's at the detriment of the business that I've started, right? I've started this. It's a starting a campaign is starting a small business, honestly. Like you taking care of the financials and promoting and all the things. We need to get people who are able to work and do the work and be diligent with their work. And through that, we can, with taxes, let's give tax breaks to small businesses. If we can do that, then we can promote the middle class and make sure that the middle class is able to be sustained. Because right now, especially in Florida, with the housing prices and the insurance prices, that's where the inflation is just out of control, but we're not addressing the core issues. Like, why are insurance companies leaving? It's because we're being ravaged by hurricanes once a year or a couple times a year, and they don't want to invest in homes that could just be destroyed every year. And so how do we influence insurance companies to come in and take care of us without making us just fork over a ton of cash for them? I believe that act of God scenarios could be supplemented through federal spending. So can we say the federal government can step in and help incentivize the insurance companies to come in and protect us and promote more insurance companies? We need more. That's the reason, is we don't have enough. And so the small amount of insurance companies that come in are able to just charge whatever they want, and we are all suffering from it. And same with the housing communities. We have corporations coming in and buying up residential areas, and we now live in a there's a whole renters class, and that we're not able to escape from because we're paying an exorbitant amount of money just to rent. And that just goes to a small group of people, and good for them for being smart businessmen, but we also should have regulations to say if you're a corporation, you shouldn't be allowed to buy up residential property. That should be saved for the people and to promote and help the middle class to own homes and start their own life on their own terms. Because right now it's not working. And the legislatures in Florida, they're not helping the issue either, because they're too focused on culture wars to see the big problems that are coming down the pipeline. Like that's just my opinion. So
Well, that's also a fact. Unfortunately, the Florida state legislature works at the behest of lobbyists that are prolific in the there are some Republicans that existed in the legislature, but they are a numerical minority when it comes against the plutocratic forces in both the state house and the state senate. And one of the things I appreciate, you support capitalism, but you support one that's properly balanced, where it gives people, average people, a stake in social mobility and allows people and would provide the proper environment for people to own their own property. It's a sort of distributism, if you will, is what it's called. And I appreciate that. Now, moving over to the issues of manufacturing, one of the big concerns that I have, and the viewers of the show have, and I particular, is the loss of manufacturing and how it affects our capacity to defend ourselves. In a nutshell, what would you do to restore manufacturing, not only to the state of Florida, which has a manufacturing sector, but the nation as a whole?
We need to localize it. Let's make sure that we have the places and the people who are able to manufacture what we need. And instead of constantly buying things from China and constantly, it's at our own detriment, right? So how do we prioritize building stuff here at home? If we can figure that out, like, then that's part of promoting the arts and sciences, right? If we need imaginative people to be ahead of the curve instead of trying to keep up with whatever like the new trend on Amazon is, right? That's only going to help Jeff Bezos, right? So how do we do this? It takes a village, honestly, and it's about getting the village to work together to do what's needed to be done. But we can only do that if we agree on what needs to happen. And what happens now is we disagree on where we want to go with the future. And that's where I talk about the great perception, is people perceive that we should be focusing on one issue when they're actually helping adversaries in their goals. So how do we self-realize? We have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves what we want, and we have to get the work done and put in the work. And we need to have imaginative people step up and use the free market to make sure that we are to create a better tomorrow for the future of Americans. Because if we don't, then we're just going to allow China to take over, and because we're being lazy. If we keep being lazy, if we're just going to rest on our laurels, then we're not going to get anything done. It takes work, but it also takes agreement, and we have to agree on things before we can get the needed work done. And that's where I've taken it back to the environment. Like, if we can't agree that the environment's important and that we have an impact, then we're not going to get anything done, and at our own detriment. And so how do we keep going? I believe investing in green infrastructure is super important, and it may not sound like your typical Republican conservative, but I would argue that it is being the most conservative. I'm actually being more conservative than other conservatives. So if we can at least agree that that is an issue, then maybe we can move forward in living on a safer planet.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think you bring up an interesting kernel of the point, because you're going over certain general themes here that I'm hearing, which is us coming together into common agreement, which is in essence of my radical civic nationalism, which protects individualism and whatnot, but doesn't allow the individualism to crowd out the notion of coming together as a community to accomplish great national tasks. And that's one of the issues that has to come to the fore when we agree that there is a problem of massive deindustrialization, that is a problem for our prosperity, our capacity to innovate, and our ability to defend ourselves. And I sent you that quote by Mike Lofgren, who is the former congressional aide, and he's written in numerous books, and he talks about how we have to quit playing politics or doing politics as an Army-Navy football game and as the circus maximus, or as I refer to it, as a circus of distraction, which characterizes much of American politics. And you obviously realize there is a problem in manufacturing, and it's going to take multiple problems, as you said, creative solutions to solve this. A couple of more questions, because I know we're pressed for time.
Yeah, I actually have to make my mom lunch at the moment, but I just want to leave with one thing. I talk about in my writings about as an artist, we have primary colors, and you have three. You have three primary colors. With lighting, it's you have red, blue, and green. With paint, you have red, blue, and yellow, and you need all three to paint a Rembrandt, right? Right now, we only have, in politics, you have red and blue, and there's not a lot that we can paint. Sometimes we meet in the middle with some purple. A lot of the times we just have these binary choices. Like our legislatures, our government is based on three branches of government. We have the executive, the legislative, and judicial. With Christianity, we have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Like these three-legged stools help support our system. I'm not saying that we should have a third party. I'm just saying that when it comes to legislation, we need to be able to identify where on the spectrum do you lie, instead of just uniformly agreeing that it's a yay or a nay. Can you figure out what hue would help the legislation, that if you don't like it, how can you change it that the other side can agree? Then that's where Henry Clay talks about mutual concessions. We need to have people who are able to work and talk and paint a beautiful picture for the future of America, which can only be done if we're able to find that three-legged stool. And that's where that quote you talked about, it's that the Army-Navy football game, like who's going to win? And it becomes more about like owning the other side and winning, and how do we all as Americans win? And that is when we get the work done and stop the culture wars and stop disrupting, because I feel like that's what Rick Scott does, is he's a disruptor and at his own personal benefit. And I'm here to encourage him to retire so he can spend more time with his grandkids and allow the future generation to step up. But yeah, I am pressed on time. I live here with my mom. She has limited mobility, and I have to make her lunch. It is lunchtime. So Nevin, it has been wonderful talking to you. Is there any final questions you have before I?
Yes, yes. One or two, obviously, and then one question after we sign off. Where can people find your campaign platform, and where can they contact you? Your books.
Columbus. Yeah, columbusforcongress.com. You can read my policies. I'm still working on my personal profile page. That's I feel like my policies are more important than like where I come from personally. Like I'm pretty self-explanatory. If you want to donate, please donate. It's a grassroots campaign, so I need all the help I can get to help get Rick Scott to retire. And if you can support, that would be wonderful. And I hope I can gain people's vote by August 20th. And I hope to make it to the general election. That would be wonderful. And we can have I plan on having a fun, lighthearted vegan campaign. I'm not here to go for red meat and attack people. I want it to be a peaceful, wonderful celebration of our country. And I look forward to my future in politics. Even if it doesn't work this time around, at least maybe I can help demystify the process for others who can do it better. And maybe there are people out there who feel that there is a moderate voice that is more powerful than the polarized echo chambers. So thank you for having me. And I'm here at your pleasure. If you want to contact me, Facebook Messenger, I'm here. Find my profile on Facebook, which you can find on the website. And I'm in constant correspondence with people on Facebook every single day. So that's a great way to reach me.
Yeah, and you've been very responsive and polite in the responses, even with ones that you disagree with. Thank you so much. I got one more question. We'll do it offline. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, John. It's a pleasure. Hopefully we can do some more interviews in the future so you can elaborate more on your ideas. And we will talk soon. And good luck and God bless everybody, and wishing your campaign well.
Thank you so much.